Welcome back. It's been a couple weeks. First, I wanted to go through a few announcements. I wanted to thank all the new subscribers who I think found me from the Urban Fund, YSSIS014, something like that. This is what mine looks like, TRNT2 cable. We talked about this one a little while back, but I saw a couple new subscribers, and then I saw Bad Guy's video, so I figured, so everyone must be doing a little research. So congratulations for watching the video and doing some research before you make that purchase. So thank you guys for subscribing and stopping by. So second, I saw this on the KZ page on Facebook. They're basically saying, they've been out of work since, mid-January. They have zero inventory. And at the moment, they don't have any stock of any inventory, so please stand by while they kind of work through their issues with coronavirus. So I just saw that and thought that was, if anyone was going to order something from China, you might want to think twice about that at the moment. But today we're here to talk about the diamond, the KB ear diamond. And so we did a little unboxing, first look a little while back. And so for those of you who didn't watch that one, this is sort of what it looks like. And I will apologize for my new Samsung phone, which will inevitably have problems autofocusing until the new update comes out. But as far as what this feels like, it's sort of a heavy metalish shell, the nice brass fittings. This is the cable that ships with it. It feels super premium in your hands, and there's a nice weight to it, nice substance to it. And super comfortable, kind of all around, even without talking about any of the sound. It's a really nice in your hand. Kind of one of my favorites. And it doesn't look like that when you look at the pictures. It sort of looks more like the TFZ number 3, but TFZ number 3 was basically all plastic, and this is a very premium, very nice shell, and it just feels kind of great in your ear. And this is the leather case it comes in, and it actually comes with some accessories. Get some foam tips, some regular silicone tips, and there is another set of tips which I think I took out and didn't put back in the box, but there are some more foam tips that come with it as well. So I did buy this one on Amazon a little while back because I had a gift certificate. It's a little cheaper straight from China, but as KZ said, it's kind of a gamble whether where you're ordering it from actually has stock and whether they have anyone to ship it out to you. But so I think it's still on Amazon. It's about $87, and I think it was $79 on AliExpress. So it's not a huge difference in price. So a couple tips if you happen to buy the KB ear diamond. It is a diamond-like carbon driver. It is tight and fast. Sort of the 1 minute overview of, since a couple people came from the Urban Fund, the Urban Fund tried to kind of out-blonde the blonde, and it pretty much does that. It kind of goes lower, deeper, it's a little faster. It sort of tweaked a lot of problems that people had with the blonde, but sort of at its heart, it's still a blonde. It still sounds very similar to a blonde, just sounds a little bit better. It's kind of like a blonde if you notch it up one, like a blonde plus, or maybe what the blonde Mark II is going to sound like. So the diamond sort of approached it a different problem, and they sort of said, this is still a single DLC dynamic driver, but the issue people that had with especially the blonde was it never really approached a treble head. It had a lot of problems. It was a very much sub-bass focused, easygoing, listening IAM, not so much for people who like the more technical side of music. So the KB ear tries to walk this line of being that natural sounding dynamic driver, but push the technicals, the precision, the cleanliness, to the point that takes beyond the blonde, yet still has a lot of that single dynamic driver, note weight, and richness and bass that people prefer. So that was it. My first video, I think, was called the Tightrope Walker, and that was what they really tried to do, was to walk this fine line of dynamic driver, richness, great sound, but push it as far as they could while still, having a dynamic driver sound. So that was the gist of it, and why it's a little different than the Urban Ear, where the Urban Ear is pretty much a example of a dynamic driver being a dynamic driver. So if you happen to buy this guy, the included cable is great. The tips, I didn't really have too much luck with the tips. These are actually KZ Starline tips, and I'm kind of a bass guy, so these kind of give you a little bit more bass, and so that's why those are on here and not any of the foam tips or silicone tips that are in the box. Cable is great. It's actually a very nice cable, and there was a story behind the cable. They picked it for a reason, because it sounds well. So I don't think there's any real need to redo the cable. So the biggest issue that I saw people when reviewing seemed to be recessed vocals, and this guy really needs a lot of volume. Take this to where you normally listen to music, notch it up, take it to just about as much as you can take, and then go down one. That's about where this one really needs to be. And oddly, Kopi Okai, who tuned this one, I think also did the Ash, and the Ash actually has the same dynamic to it. It sounds a lot better with the volume way up. So if you bought the KB Ear and weren't too happy with it, definitely try turning the volume up. Not so much to get more detail or anything like that. It just, the impact of it is much different at a much higher volume. So DLC driver, it's got this tight and fast design to it, and it really comes across in the bass. And this thing is sort of a mid-bass monster. It's very impactful. So where the Urban Fun is your sub-bass focus, this is a mid-bass kick drum, bass drum, not so much electronics, which is the Urban Fun kind of specialty. Very much the best drums. It's TFZ number 3 style drums, and it's very subtle too. It's so you get the driver tight and fast, but then you're also getting this tweaked, sharpened, clean treble. So the strike, the impact of the bass is very clear with the rest of the foundation drum sound. It's really great. It's the main reason why I kept the number 3. It was sort of the only thing I had that would really reproduce that drum sound. This does it, and whereas the Urban Fun sort of retired the blonde, this guy pretty much retired my number 3, even though the number 3 is actually more of a sub-bass guy. But for drum-wise, I think the KB Ear kind of wins it. It's just kind of an all-around better sound than the number 3, especially on the drums. And I like the number 3 drums. So Martin Garrix Animals. So after I just said that it was really good on kind of analog real drum sets. So if you want to hear, how impactful the mid bass can be, Martin Garrix Animals, right in the beginning, you don't hear the drum, but when the drum kicks in, you'll kind of be blown away how tight and fast and strong the bass is on this guy. It kind of blew me away. And people who haven't turned up the volume, you really need to do it, because it's a whole different IAM when all that power is going through those. Really good. So that one I kind of found early on. It blew me away because I listened to that on other IAMs, but this one probably the best. So Nine Inch Nails, Dead Souls, again, it's the drum sound, and that's more of an analog drum sound where you're going to clearly hear the strike. It's almost like hitting a membrane, and then you hear the drum. It's all there, and the intro to that song and those drums, it's a great song too, but listen to the beginning on your IM and listen to those drums in particular. So where the diamond really shines are these sort of hard rock bands, multiple instruments playing at a pretty fast tempo, a lot of energy. So Blink 182's All the Small Things. It kind of stands out because there's a lot of energy there, but bass wise, it's the drums. And this guy is sort of like the Ash in that way. And you're very much, your brain kind of centers in on the drum sound because it sounds different than anything else you probably have. And so bands like Blink 182, Foo Fighters, all those guys who had strong drummers tend to sound really good on the Diamond. And then to take that one step further, Fetty Wap's Trap Queen. So not so much an analog drum sound, but the percussion that he uses, the samples that he uses, same thing. It's kind of the same thing as Animals. It's like it's right in the beginning. There's a lot of high frequency samples, and then when that bass drops, you'll be blown away. It is big and strong, and it's all pretty much bin bass focused. But something about, and that won't be the only rap song that comes up on the Diamond. It's the tempo, kind of the cleanliness, sort of the way his delivery is, where it's kind of sharp and fast. It just kind of matches the driver in that way, and it just sounds really good. So where this all doesn't sound good, so Beyonce's Sweet Dreams and Kelly Rowland's Commander. So two songs that have there's sort of a high end and a low end to those songs, and there's not a whole lot in the middle. And that's where the Diamond, where people sort of have complaints on it. The visceral impact, where there isn't percussion, where there's no drums, it kind of falls flat. And these two songs where there's just Beyonce singing and kind of a sub bass, a low bass sound with nothing in the middle, it sort of falls flat on the Diamond. And I totally understand when people said that in their reviews that there's an issue there. And a lot of it is the impact that you get from the percussion. And when you don't have it, the rest of it sort of feels like it needs a drum or it needs something else. And we'll kind of touch on that again as well. But those two songs, which they sound amazing on the Urban Fun because of the Urban Fun sub bass. And then when you lose that, you're kind of left with a kind of an upper mid vocal that doesn't really have a complement to it. And I think that's sort of the best way to feel about what's missing there. So the mids, I would say the Diamond has this intimate vocal style and natural sound, which really comes across in the mids. So kind of a newish song, Tones and I, Dance Monkey. If you've ever heard this song, I swear that I thought she had like some computer filtered voice, but nope, that's her voice. And when you hear it on the Diamond, it's really close, really intimate, and you can just hear all the inflections in her voice. Really, really nice. And the song just sounds kind of amazing on the Diamond. Again, it's her voice in that range, the music, everything is sort of in the sweet spot of the Diamond. So Fleetwood Mac's Dreams, same thing. Stevie Nicks' voice is kind of similar to hers, but the natural sound of all the instruments kind of comes through. And it's probably easily the best version of Dreams that I've heard. It probably even better than the Urban Fun and the Blondes, just because you have a much cleaner sound. So the bass is sort of tighter, faster. The instruments, you're getting kind of better timbre, more natural. Mostly you're hearing both sides of the sound, the strike and the decay. And it's a very subtle difference, but as soon as you hear it in a song like that, it's kind of, your brain just kind of clicks and like, wow, that sounds really good. And that's sort of what's happening. So N.E.R.D Lemon, another intimate vocal sound, actually a rap song. But again, this is Rihanna. So listen to Rihanna's voice. Listen to how intimate and how clear her voice is. And I know people will say that the female vocals are recessed, but trust me on this one, you got to turn up the volume really loud. And this particular song was sort of my benchmark of how loud it should be. If you can actually get the sub bass to rumble, you're at about the right volume. And this song sounds amazing, and her voice sounds amazing. And I think it's all three of these female voices are kind of in that same higher range, and it just works. So what doesn't work? Quiet Adele vocals, and this is where people complain that female vocals are recessed. I think kind of in the lower female range, it definitely sounds a little recessed. If it does, it has this problem as well. If you're just listening to a voice and there's no percussion, you kind of lose the impact of it as well. It sounds a bit recessed, a little flat. So yeah, again, I think it's the same problem depending on what your music choice is. If you throw a ton of energy into it, it comes right back at you, and it sounds amazing. These quieter solo vocals where there's no other instruments, they sound a bit flat. They're not really airy. A lot of the things that we would want in a kind of a beautiful vocal, other than kind of the weight of the vocal, which is really good. The rest of it, it's sort of missing a lot of things that turn people on to solo style, and I think the Urban Fun kind of falls in that range of just female vocals sound beautiful on it because of the richness and the depth of what you hear in the voice. So the treble, I think they definitely pushed it as far as they were comfortable pushing it, and perhaps it's going to be too not enough, too subtle for people who are sort of treble heads, more analytic. It's not that at all. It's pushing treble as far as you can, but still staying warm, still having a pretty thick note weight. So you can kind of think of it as it was more of pushing the blonde towards the treble, towards the treble head style T4, but stopping, 3/4 of the way there. It definitely doesn't go analytical at all. So Blink-182's All the Small Things again. So other than the drums, the guitars. So I think when we talk about a natural sound, there's certain instruments that sound better than others, and electric guitars, all that power, even with all the distortion, it sounds great on the Diamond. I don't know what else to say about it, but listen to that song on your IM. Listen to the guitars. It's kind of a challenging song to listen to, especially at louder volumes. But, there's nothing that really makes you cringe. There's nothing where you say, wow, that just kind of, there's a bump there that I could barely listen to that part. Really good on that song. And then when you throw the drums in with it, it's sort of this issue of it. The treble needs the friend. It needs the drums. It needs the percussion. And the whole thing becomes very impactful. And it all comes together in Blink-182. So Harry Styles' Golden, kind of a newish, super catchy song. But right in the beginning, the cymbals, you get that nice, rich cymbal sizzle. It's kind of all there. And I don't know. I've been listening to the song over and over again in the car. Again, it's another one of those songs where you hear it and you don't really notice the drums, especially in the car. There's drums there, but listen to it on the Diamond, and when you hear the actual drum sounds with the strike and the actual bass side of the drum, it all comes together, and that song is super catchy. It just all sounds great. And plus the song is kind of up-tempo, lots of energy. It just kind of matches this whole fast, tight energy. You can kind of get the feel for what kind of music plays really well on this, as opposed to kind of the EDM sub bass. This is definitely more of your rock style, loud instruments, a lot of energy. That's exactly where the sweet spot is on this guy. So where it falls down a little bit is on pure treble, right? So if it doesn't have a friend, if it doesn't have drums, so Woo Kid's Run Boy Run, it's this big ascendant strings, there's a vocal there, and your brain keeps on getting focused on the vocal where it should be on the big ascendant strings, which should evoke some emotion, because it's a very ascendant is just the right word for that song, and the focus is just a little off, and the visceral impact just isn't there. Just hearing the strings alone, and the same thing happens with the horns. Whereas the Diamond does this really amazing thing where the bass never overruns any other sound. It always stays. It's kind of like a turtle head. It kind of just stays right there, and it pokes its head out, and it lets you know that there's plenty of bass there, and then it kind of goes away. It keeps everything very clean, but it's sort of at the risk of this impact of when you get a very strong sound like a horn, it comes across as kind of flat. It's just not as impactful as it should. And this song kind of shows that's one of the songs that sounds absolutely amazing on the BA5, because it just rises to the occasion. Whereas on this, it kind of comes off a bit flat because you have no drums, and the treble isn't really tweaked that far enough that it becomes sparkling or airy or any of the things that a treble head would be looking for. It just doesn't take it that far, and it all, you can see most of it in that song, whereas what should be a very uplifting song kind of comes off a bit flat. So Soundstage, what I noticed most about the Diamond over something like the Urban Fun or even the Blonde is the layering. The ability to pick out and follow instruments is just better. And it's hard to put a number. Is it 10% better, twice as better? It's just better. And certain songs that you've listened to, like Jack U, Where Are You, that's kind of Diplo, Justin Bieber, someone else, Skrillex or something. Kind of a complex, lots of stuff, lots of moving parts to the song. But when you hear it on the Diamond, everything is sort of, it's there in space. There's a depth to it. There's a height to it. The Diamond has this really cool soundstage, which is more of a volume. And as you're listening to the song, you'll basically hear instruments kind of there's more depth to it, so you hear them further back and closer in and above you. Pretty wild. So whereas the Urban Fun and the Blonde are pretty much wide, this is much more of a volumetric presentation, and your brain will kind of be thinking like, well, there's something different here, and listen really closely, and you'll get kind of depth cues about where things are. It's really cool, different. So it's people have described it as sort of wide, average width, or less than average width. On a song like this, it will definitely feel like single dynamic driver wide, kind of Blonde wide, but you'll definitely have more height to it, and you'll definitely perceive more depth to it. So yeah, slightly different in that respect as well too. So that's about it. I apologize for running a little long on this one. There's just a lot, and it's $80, so I thought it deserved a little respect to go into as much detail as I did, so people don't spend $80 and then say, well, why does it not sound as good as my Blonde? Well, it wasn't really designed to out-blonde the Blonde. It was to come up with a different sound that was taking the dynamic driver and tuning it more towards a technical driver, more like a hybrid as opposed to a better version of a single dynamic driver. So again, thank you, all the new subscribers, you guys who showed up for the Urban Fun. Thank you guys, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.